All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today for Seabridge's webinar on exporting goods in today's evolving market. This is the third webinar in a series to celebrate the 2015 Asia Pacific Cities Summit being held in Brisbane from the 5th to the 8th of July. My name is Nathan Merriweather, General Manager at Seabridge Global Logistics, and I'll be facilitating today's presentation. Today you'll be hearing from industry experts, Timothy Rice, National Customs Manager at Seabridge Global Logistics, who has over 20 years experience in the freight forwarding and customs industry. And we've asked Diana Georgieva to join us from Australian Business Consulting and Solutions with over 20 years experience within management of international trade for CCIQ and ABCNS. Today I'll be providing you with a very brief overview of the present market outlook and some corresponding figures. I will then hand to Timothy, who will cover export processes and considerations from a forwarding perspective, such as Incoterms, the customs tariff and duty drawbacks. And lastly, I'll hand over to Diana, who will give us insight into the specific requirements of various export documentation and highlight potential obstacles from the Chamber's perspective before we close for any questions that you may have. On that note, at any time throughout today's webinar, if you have any questions, pre-prepared or otherwise, please type them in the window on the bottom left and we will note these to be answered at the end of the presentation. And just in case you feel that you've missed anything, CCIQ will be sending out a copy of this webinar to you, so if you've missed any of the samples that we are providing throughout the presentation, you'll get an opportunity to review them later. Generally speaking, as you may be aware, Australia has a relatively narrow export base. We are dependent upon commodities. The Australian government has endeavoured of late to redevelop the Australian manufacturing sector continually with limited success. The economy of Australia is one of the largest mixed market economies in the world, with a GDP of approximately $2 trillion as of 2014. And in 2012, Australia was listed as the 12th largest national economy by nominal GDP and the 17th largest measured by PPP adjusted GDP, about 2% of the world economy. Australia is the 19th largest importer and the 19th largest exporter. To add pressure to that, Australia has commitments under the World Trade Organization on tariffs and tariff quotas, export subsidies and domestic support for agricultural products. And as you may have seen in media much of late in regards to China, Australia has entered into free trade agreements with Asian nations, Canada, Chile, Korea, Malaysia, New Zealand, Japan, Singapore, Thailand and the United States, to name a few, and we'll touch on these a little bit more later. There's also a great resource there that I've listed for you if you're a new exporter on austrade.gov.au. It just gives you a bit of a surface level detail on some of the major international markets that Australia has trade with. Our top 10 trading partners. In the fiscal year of 2013 and 2012, Australia's total trade with China was valued at about 130 Australian billion dollars, which is about 25% of our total trade in goods and services approximately, making them, as I'm sure you know, our far most important single market for Australia. Trade between Australia and India grew between 2000 and 2009 by about 25%, making India Australia's 10th largest two-way trading partner and 5th largest export market. And I'm sure you know one of our major nations to watch in terms of growth and future trade with Australia. Australia's manufactured goods constitute about 33% of total exports, with food and metal products and machinery and equipment accounting for the biggest share of that. Agricultural products, particularly wheat and wool, make up 5% of our trade outflows, which is reasonably significant. Australia's largest export markets are China and Japan, South Korea, India, as well as the European Union nations following after that. Food manufacturing, oil and gas extraction, beverage manufacturing, specifically beer, education services and legal services are suggested to be Australia's key growth areas to support the economy over the next few years. Businesses, particularly in the food manufacturing sector, are positioned well for the next 5 years, as Australia's high food standards are very attractive to our local market, being the Asia Pacific region, and other foreign markets as well, as investment continues into Australia, but also just due to our high food standards. Although raw commodities and food and beverage pose the greatest risk for compliance issues, both customs and quarantine, and this is what we'll be discussing a little bit more in brief today. And so on that note, I will now hand over to Tim to discuss the customs and quarantine matters, therefore.
Thank you, Nathan. Okay, export documentation. Before we discuss specific export documentation, let me just start by highlighting two key areas of international trade that affect export documents. Exporters should familiarise themselves with Incoterms and customs tariff. Firstly, I'll cover Incoterms. What are Incoterms? The Incoterms rules of international commercial terms are a series of predefined commercial terms published by the International Chamber of Commerce. They are widely used in international commercial transactions for procurement purposes. They are a series of three-letter trade terms related to common contractual sales practices. The Incoterms rules are intended primarily to clearly communicate the tasks, costs, and risks associated with transportation and delivery of goods. The Incoterm rules are accepted by governments, legal authorities, and practitioners worldwide for the interpretation of most commonly used terms in international trade. They are intended to reduce or remove altogether uncertainties arising from different interpretation of the rules in different countries. As such, they are regularly incorporated into sales contracts worldwide. First published in 1936, the Incoterm rules have been periodically updated, with the 8th version, Incoterms 2010, having been published in January 1st, 2011. Incoterms is a registered trademark of the ICC, and booklet of Incoterms can be purchased through the Chamber. Some common terms you may have heard mentioned include FOB and CIF. It's very important that exporters understand the details of each Incoterm they may use and their responsibility for each one. One common mistake that can lead to confusion is not including a named place for that Incoterm. If you're using FOB and shipping from Sydney, then the correct way to communicate this is FOB Sydney. Not including a name place here means the buyer will not know where they have to arrange and pay for freight from. Which Incoterm you use depends on your situation and that of the buyer. Whilst there is no rule about which Incoterm should be used for particular countries or industries, buyers will most likely have a strong preference for how they buy from overseas. Some Incoterms result in less effort for the customer, so require more arrangements to be made from the exporter's side. This may be a good customer service offering from your business should buyers seek to have goods delivered right through to their door, but please be aware of your responsibility and obligations under each Incoterm, especially with regards to fees and charges from overseas and overseas governments. We at Seabridge are more than happy to give guidance and further assistance in this area, which brings us to the second key area, customs tariffs. What is a customs tariff? A customs tariff is a government levy on a product entering a country and can be used to protect local industry. The harmonised system, referred to as a HS code, is a broad classification system of approximately 5,000 6-digit headings, which are used to classify goods involved in international trade. It has been adopted as the basis for describing and classifying goods for customs purposes by most trading nations. The International Harmonised Commodity Description and Coding System is a 6-digit classification which the combined Australian Customs Tariff and the Australian Harmonised Export Commodity Classification are based. Seabridge's licensed customs brokers assist all our export clientele with professional product tariff classification. This is very important service, as a mistake in this area could lead to delays in customs clearance at destination by not having your product's tariff classification done correctly. This would affect authorised documentation, such as free trade agreement certificates of origin, which require the declared product's 6-digit classification to be correctly advised. Not only that, more importantly, to you, the exporter, a misdeclaration on the Australian Customs Export Declaration could result in customs fines or prosecutions. Okay, the export documentation. SLI, Shipper's Letter of Instruction, Bill of Lading or Waybill commercial invoice and packing list, and permits for quarantine for export under the ex-stock system. Other export documentation that we will not be covering in more detail, but you should be aware of, are wood packaging declarations and treatment certificates. Certain countries have strict requirements regarding wood packaging. Please call Seabridge for further details on specific country requirements. And of course, don't forget, dangerous goods certificates are required for all DG shipments. The following documentation will be covered in more detail by Diana from the Australian Business Consulting and Solutions, being Certificates of Origin, Free Trade Agreements, and ATA carnets. Export documents require careful preparation to avoid delays in customs clearance at their port of discharge, and also to comply with documentary letters of credit that specify conditions such as precise product descriptions, packing lists, and attestations, including quarantine certificates and certificates of origin. Electronic documentation has made a complex process much easier, but mistakes can be costly. It is imperative that you understand the export documentation process and to ensure that the preparation of documentation is carried out with meticulous accuracy. SLI, Shipper's Letter of Instruction. A shipper's letter of instruction is simply that, a letter from the shipper directing the carrier or freight forwarder to prepare documents for shipping of a new shipment, and it will give all necessary declarations and information relating to the shipment. It is important to complete all areas of a carrier's or freight forwarder's SLI and provide the shipment's commercial invoice with your SLI. Remember to call if you're not sure how to fully complete any areas on an SLI. On receiving your SLI, your carrier or freight forwarder will begin the process for export, from booking space on vessel and aircraft, to lodging the Australian export declarations, to producing a bill of lading. Which brings us to bills of lading. A bill of lading is a document issued by a carrier which details a shipment of merchandise and gives title to that shipment to a specified party. Bills of lading are one of three important documents used in international trade to help guarantee that exporters receive payment and importers receive merchandise. A straight bill of lading is used when payment has been made in advance of shipment and requires a carrier to deliver the merchandise to the appropriate party. An order bill of lading is used when shipping merchandise prior to payment, requiring a carrier to deliver the merchandise to the importer, and at the endorsement of the exporter, the carrier may transfer title to the importer. Endorsed order bills of lading can be traded as security or serve as a collateral against debt obligations. Forwarders and shipping companies provide a copy of for authorization prior to issuing a finalized or original bill of lading. Please make sure the details are correct, as reissuing or amending bills of lading after authorization can result in additional fees from the carrier and also have detrimental effect on other authorized documentation such as letters of credit and certificates of origin. Commercial invoice and packing lists. A commercial invoice and packing list, combined as acceptable, must be provided in order for your freight forwarder to complete customs export declaration formalities. Commercial invoice for international trade is different to domestic invoice or receipt. It should advise the Incoterm, the currency of the stated monetary amounts, the detailed product description and its 6-digit tariff code if possible, the consignee address and contact details, and your address and contact details. It is important to note that a country of origin declaration on the commercial invoice is not an acceptable declaration for claiming benefits of a free trade agreement. A certificate of origin or specified free trade agreement certificate of origin certificate is required to meet most free trade agreement claim requirements. Another important documents to consider when exporting is when you're exporting produce. Ex-Doc was developed by the Department of Agriculture for the purpose of managing export documentation for primary produce. To export certain produce, permits to export and certificates for import are required. Commodities covered by Ex-Doc requirements are edible meat, dairy, seafood, grains, eggs, horticulture, skins and hides, wool, and inedible meat products. Export documentation includes export permits as required by the Export Control Act of 1982, export certificates as required by import country authorities. To obtain an export permit, you will need to provide the information as required by the Export Control Act, as well as any information that is required to satisfy importing country requirements. Information required may include details of the consignment, product, transport, and the product preparation. Ex-stock is detailed and specific to produce and the country of import. Therefore, it would be best to contact Seabridge directly to discuss your specific produce export requirements and services Seabridge has to offer in obtaining these permits and certificates. Seabridge Global Logistics provides assistance with your export documentation requirements throughout our services, ensuring that you are informed on the ever-changing requirements of the importing country that are related to you, therefore enhancing and further value-adding services your business can give to your clients. Before I hand over to Diana, I just want to quickly touch on the Australian Customs Duty Drawback Scheme, which enables exporters to obtain a refund of customs duty paid on imported goods where those goods are exported unused since importation or are treated, processed, or incorporated into other goods for export. Exporters are eligible to claim a duty drawback if they are the legal owner of the goods at the time the goods are exported, or a previous owner has assigned this right to you. Once goods are exported, you have 4 years to lodge your claim. The minimum claim per application is $100, and you can make one claim for all your exports for those 4-year periods or a period of time within that 4 years. So if you're an exporter of products that were subject to import duty into Australia at the time of importation, then we recommend that you contact Seabridge to discuss this scheme further and how Seabridge can assist you in claiming back this import duty, therefore making your product either more profitable or competitive in the export market against your competitors. Now to Diana from the Australian Business Consulting and Solutions to discuss export documentation from the Chamber's perspective.
Thank you, Tim. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm the Manager of International Trade for the Australian Business Consulting and Solutions, which is the trading arm of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry Queensland and the Australian Business Chamber. My export documentation team services over 2,000 exporters and freight companies across the states of Queensland and New South Wales. With the greatest pleasure, for the next 20 minutes, I will give you an overview of the export documentation requirements from the Chamber perspective, where the chambers fit in the export supply chain, and why the chambers play such an integral role in the exporting process. What are the key documents required for exporting and issued by my team? What certificates of origin are applicable, and which type of certificates support the relevant free trade agreement? You will hear about TAFTA, CAFTA, JEPA, UNSTA certificates of origin. You will learn what the certificate of resale is, and how the ATA Carnet can save you from paying duties on temporary exports. You will also learn what is the required paperwork if you're going on a business trip to Saudi Arabia. I will brief you about the processes and the procedures to obtain these documents, timeframes and delivery options, costs involved, and how you can save up to 47% of those costs. And finally, I'll share with you some of the most common mistakes done by our clients my team come across on a daily basis and how to avoid those. Let's start with the export supply chain, and to be more specific, the significant role the Chambers of Commerce play in the supply chain. Many of you probably are not aware that the Chambers of Commerce have been issuing non-preferential certificates of origin since 1923. We have been authorized under various international conventions to do so. More recently, closely working with customs authorities and accommodating the requirements of the various free trade agreements Australia has with other countries, the Chambers of Commerce are issuing preferential certificates of origin, or as we call them, FTA certificates. As a matter of fact, the World Chamber Federation, which is uniting the global network of 12,000 chambers, is the author of the International Certificates of Origin Guideline publications, which establishes the standard procedures for issuing and attesting certificates of origin by all chambers across the globe. The World Chamber Federation also manages the ATA Carnet system, which allows for the duty-free and tax-free temporary import of goods to the World Chamber network. In Australia, through Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, ACI, we are authorized by the Department of Foreign Affairs to issue preferential and non-preferential certificates of origin. ACI, which is the overarching body of the individual state chambers of commerce, ensures that the authorized chambers follow strict documentary evidence issuing procedures and remain JASENSA compliant to be able to issue preferential certificates of origin. The key message here is that we not only issue certificates of origin and ATA carnets, but we also have the systems in place and the global support to monitor and resolve issues at overseas destinations. If there are any irregularities or issues with your certificate of origin, we can intervene through ACI and Department of Foreign Affairs and resolve the matter at the customs port level. Documents required by the importing countries, documents required by Australian authorities, transport documents, special documents, commercial documents, banks and financial institution documents are the 6 broad categories of documentation you will encounter when exporting. The Chambers of Commerce specialty are the certificates of origin from the documents required by the importing countries category, and also the ATA carnets, the certificate of resale, certificate of manufacture from the special documentation category. We can also certify any of the other documents if requested by the overseas customs authorities. The most common export documents requested from overseas and issued by my team are the certificates of Australian origin and the certified declarations of origin, the preferential certificates of origin associated with the various FTAs Australia has with other countries, which are Thailand-Australia Free Trade Agreement Certificate of Origin, ASEAN-Australia-New Zealand Free Trade Agreement Certificate of Origin, Australia-Chile Free Trade Agreement Certificate of Origin, ACI Australia-Korea Free Trade Agreement Certificate of Origin, and ACI Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement Certificate of Origin. Besides the various certificates of origin, we also issue certificates of resale, certificates of manufacture, and we also certify supporting documents such as packing lists, commercial invoices, halal certificates, and any other documents the overseas customs or the banks in their letters of credit may request to be certified by us. The most common requests are from the Middle East and Russia. We certify visa letter authorizations for Saudi Arabia also in order that general managers or other representatives of a company to be able to obtain visa to travel to Saudi Arabia. And finally, we issue a document called an ATA carnet, which is a must-have if you don't want to pay duties and taxes on your temporary exports. The certificate of origin. Many customs measures relating to goods being imported into a country, in particular those relating to tariff and public health, depend for their administration on the origin of the goods. The increasing number and complexity of preferential trade agreements has emphasized the importance of currently identifying the origin of imports. Claims for preferential treatment must usually be accompanied by an official certificate stating the origin of the goods. Therefore, when importing goods, it is often necessary to provide evidence of the origin of the goods. Such evidence is usually documentary and may be certificate of origin, declaration of origin, or certified declaration of origin. The certificate of Australian origin is the documentary evidence that the goods originate from Australia. In the case with the preferential certificates resulting from the various FTAs Australia has with other countries, the preferential certificates of origin are evidence that the goods are originating from the territory of one or more parties of the particular FTA. For example, goods wholly obtained in Australia to be exported to Thailand. Applicable scenario under 2 FTAs, TAFTA and UNSTA, as Thailand is part of both. The preferential certificates of origin provides the overseas buyer with the strategic advantage of paying preferential duty rates. Translated into benefits for our Australian exporter, that means that if a company from overseas imports a product from Australia, in terms of custom duties payable, it will be cheaper than importing a similar product from another country, not part of the FTA, which is a great strategic advantage for exporters when negotiating export contracts. As most countries accept electronic certification, we issue both preferential and non-preferential certificates manually and electronically. I will go in more detail later in the presentation. In relation to certificates of Australian origin issuing procedures, please contact our office to obtain the relevant exporter registration form and certificate of origin or certified declaration of origin template. With the export registration form, you will be registered with us for invoicing purposes, and your registration form also serves as a statutory declaration stating that the exporter is responsible for providing the correct information on the certificate of origin. When the freight company represents the exporter, the freight company authorized signatories must be included in the exporter registration form of the exporter. To be able to complete your certificate of origin, you will need your AOA bill or the bill of lading and your commercial invoice. Once completed, please email the certificate to us for processing. Alternatively, we can set you up for electronic certification through our electronic systems eCertify or CertConnect, which guarantees you processing of certificate within 2 hours from your submission. On the screen, you can see now the certificate of origin template, how it looks like. Certified declarations of origin. The main difference between a certificate of Australian origin and the certified declaration of origin is that while the certificate of origin is a documentary evidence that the goods originate from Australia, the certified declaration of origin is a documentary evidence that the goods originate from another country. CDO is required when the product Australian exporter exports from Australian port was initially imported from another country to be re-exported from Australia. For example, machinery from Chinese origin to be exported from Australia to the States. To issue the CDO, we may request from the exporter the original certificate of origin from the country of origin or the certificate of manufacture from the country of origin as evidence of origin. Now, let's move on to the preferential certificates of origin, where the importer will receive reduced import tariff if the product is covered by the FTA. Australia has various FTAs with different countries. However, the preferential certificates of origin are relevant to 5 FTAs only. These are Thailand, Australia Free Trade Agreement (TAFTA), which is the bilateral FTA between Australia and Thailand, ASEAN, Australia and New Zealand Free Trade Agreement (AUSTA), the multilateral FTA between Australia, New Zealand and the 10 Asian countries, Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand and Vietnam. Australia-Chile Free Trade Agreement, which is the bilateral FTA between Chile and Australia, Australia-Korea Free Trade Agreement (CAFTA), which is the bilateral FTA between Korea and Australia, and the very latest one, Japan-Australia Economic Partnership Agreement (JEPA), which is the partnership agreement between Japan and Australia. I would like to acknowledge here that with CAFTA and JEPA, exporters can make their own origin declarations. However, with these declarations, the risk will be at their end. With our certificates of origin, you're fully supported right to the port of destination. If rejection issue arises at the overseas destination, through Australian Chamber of Commerce and Department of Foreign Affairs, we will intervene the issue to be resolved and your cargo to be released. For further information, please refer to Department of Foreign Affairs website or just give us a call. Australia is currently undergoing negotiations for FTAs with India and Trans-Pacific Economic Partnership involving North America, Oceania and ASEAN. FTA with China has been signed, and we have been advised by DFAT that most likely will become operational by the end of the year. At this stage, we have no visibility to what is included in the FTA, and we will advise in due course of the certification requirements once those FTAs came into force. Quite often, exporters ask us whether there is a preferential certificate with the States, considering that Australia has an FTA with the United States. The answer is no. There is no preferential certificates for Australian product export to the United States. A non-preferential certificate of origin is sufficient enough to receive preferential treatment in the States. Certification requirements for preferential certificates of origin. The very first step exporter must do is to check whether their goods are covered by the FTA. How to do this? obtain your HS code for your product, and then check the applicable preferential rate by referring to the tariff schedules for the other country outlined in the FTA. For example, with TAFTA, you have to check the applicable TAFTA preferential rate from the Thai tariff schedule. To access preferential tariffs for exported goods, exporter must confirm whether their good qualify as originating goods from Australia or from the territory of a party of the particular FTA. How to define whether your goods are considered as originating? By referring to the relevant Rules of Origin chapter of the FTA in question. The full text of the FTAs are located on Department of Foreign Affairs website, which is www.dfat.gov.au. However, to save you time looking through thousands of pages of the FTA, please call our office and we will email you the relevant information from the FTA to assist you with defining the rules of origin for your product. For example, with TAFTA, the simple way to explain originating goods from Australia, when they are grown, fished or mined in Australia or were produced in Australia entirely from those goods. The origin of the TAFTA of those goods will be wholly obtained. The goods can also be considered as originating when they are manufactured in Australia with the majority of Australian components and some parts from overseas. Under TAFTA, the origin then is product specific. A separate unique registration form is required for each FTA type of certificate of origin. Deed of declaration for TAFTA, ANSTA registration form for ANSTA, exporter registration form CR4 for JEPA, CAFTA and Australia-Chile FTA. A separate unique preferential certificate of origin template is required for each FTA certificate. Each FTA has their own defined rules of origin, and the certificates of origin must reflect the correct origin criterion for each product listed in the certificate of origin, so as the individual requirements for the content of the certificate of origin template. Failure to do so will result in automatic rejections at overseas port, and you will be paying the full duty rates versus the preferential ones. Documentary evidence of origin is required for each shipment of goods attracting a preference under TAFTA, ANSTA, Australia-Chile FTA, and the rest of the FTAs. My advice is please contact our office for guidance and to obtain the relevant registration form, preferential certificates of origin templates, and the relevant links and information from the Department of Foreign Affairs in relation to each FTA. To give you a bit of an idea how complex the various FTAs can be when it comes to certificates of origin, I'll give you examples. Under TAFTA, all products exported from Australia to Thailand must be itemized and registered in the deed of declaration, which must be signed by the exporter. The HS code is required for each product, the applicable origin criterion, wholly obtained or product specific, and in order to receive the preferential treatment of this FTA, the correct description of the goods is also required. For example, HS code 0713.31, the origin criterion will be wholly obtained, the product will be in mung beans. This is an actual example from a client of ours. Once we receive the completed deed of declaration, we issue a TAFTA registration number for your company, which you should use as a reference in each TAFTA certificate of origin. You can see on the screen the actual TAFTA certificate of origin template, your TAFTA registration number to be listed under exporter registration reference number. To be able to complete the template, your airway bill or bill of lading will be required, and please ensure that the goods are registered in your deed of declaration. So is the individual signing the document on behalf of the exporter. Make sure that you include the correct exporter's invoice for the shipment reference. As well, otherwise will be discrepancy between your documents for the shipment and the TAFTA will be rejected overseas. Another example for you is the ANSTA certificate of origin. A special registration form is required, and on the screen you can see the actual ANSTA template. Areas requiring extra attention to avoid possible rejections at overseas ports are column 7, use the 6 digits HS code, not the 8 digits, unless your customer has requested all the documents to reflect the 8 digits HS code. The issue with extra 2 digits are that they are country specific and could cause confusion overseas. Column 8, make sure that the correct origin criterion is listed across each product. As you can see from the back page of this certificate, there are various choices, wholly obtained, PE, RVC, CTH, others, and make sure you select the correct one for each product. Column 9, FOB value is requested. If unsure about the FOB value, talk to Seabridge or to your freight company. If you don't want to disclose the FOB value on the certificate, you cannot include on the template, however, then further documentation procedures apply. Column 11, declaration by the exporter. If the goods were manufactured in Myanmar, Brunei, New Zealand, Cambodia, Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore, Laos, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, please note you must tick the box back-to-back certificate of origin in section 13 and also provide us with the original certificate of origin from the originating country. This certificate of origin shall be obtained from the respective issuing authority in the country of origin and emailed to our processing trade officer. On the basis of this certificate, our processing officer will issue the answer certificate of origin for the shipment from the Australian port. Column 13, subject to third-party invoice. This box has to be selected if the sales invoice is issued either by a company located in a third country or by an exporter for the account of that company. And also column 13, issued retroactively. The answer certificate of origin can be issued at any time prior to the exportation of the good and up to 3 working days after the exportation. If the certificate is issued more than 3 working days after the exportation, issued retroactively box has to be selected. As you can see, there is a lot involved to get your answer certificate of origin right. Just give us a call when you wish to process your first document and we will guide you all the way. Australia-Chile FTA certificate. Please pay attention to the origin criterion selection in the rules of origin column. For shipment for Chile, just give us a call and we will email you the relevant information from Department of Foreign Affairs, so as our certification requirements. ACI-CAFTA certificate of origin template. As much as in the CAFTA agreement is mentioned that a certificate of origin can cover multiple shipments, the ACI certificate of origin is for individual shipments only. The rationale behind this is that we want to avoid any possible discrepancies in certificates, such as change in goods, HS codes, origin criterion, various information, shipping details, the quantity of the product, which will result in a rejection of the document. Again, complex rules of origin. Please call our office for assistance when you're ready with your shipment for Korea. ACI-JEPA certificate of origin template. Similar to CAFTA, ACI-JEPA certificate of origin is issued for individual shipments only. Again, complex rules of origin, preference criterion, and call our office for assistance when you intend to export to Japan. My final note for preferential certificate of origin is that, considering the significance of these FTA certificates for your business, and as much as I would love to go into more detail for each FTA certificate requirements, unfortunately, we are very time constrained today. Please follow up with me after the webinar with the questions you may have, or just email me to diana.georgieva@australianbusiness.com.au at your own time. Other export documentation issued by my team are the certificates of free sale, which is a statement by the company that the products are manufactured and distributed by the company and are freely available for sale in Australia. The certificate of free sale is usually for the purpose for products registration in overseas markets such as the Middle Eastern countries, India, Indonesia, and many others. We certify visa letter authorization for Saudi Arabia. The company has to provide us with a letter from their general manager advising the purpose of the visit of the company representatives traveling for Saudi Arabia in order to obtain a business visa from the Embassy of Saudi Arabia. The letter should be on a company letterhead. Specific wording is required. Please bring the letter and a copy of the passport of the person traveling abroad to us for attestation. Once we are ready with the document, forward the letter to the Saudi Embassy. We also issue certificates of manufacture, which is documentary evidence that the product is manufactured in Australia. We certify any documents requested by the overseas customs authorities to be certified. And the final document I will mention to you today is the ATA Carnet. The ATA Carnet is an international customs document allowing duty and tax-free admission of goods temporarily imported under certain international conventions. The Carnet disposes of the need for raising bonds or depositing duties with customs in different countries. ATA Carnets are the only document in the world which will prevent you from paying custom duties on your temporary exports. Let's say you're a jewelry exporter who is taking $1.5 million collection to display at a trade show overseas. If you don't have the ATA Carnet, you will be liable for custom duties payable at destination, as the items will be considered as permanent import. A similar scenario will be the case with our client Billabong when taking surfing equipment for surfing competitions overseas. You will be amazed what our clients export under carnets. From samples for exhibition purposes, jewelry or fashion collections, to mining equipment, racing cars, aircraft, musical instruments, filming equipment. The TV channels are our regular clients. If you intend to take commercial items overseas for 6, 3 or 12 months, and you're going to return these items back to Australia, please consider the ATA carnet and give us a call. How we can assist you with the export documentation? The process is very simple. Just give us a call or email your request to exportdocs.qld@australianbusiness.com.au. Delivery option, manual certification and electronic certification options are available. The electronic certification is through our systems eCertify and CertConnect. Time frame within 2 hours processing servers through our electronic system and the same day processing for manual certification. The cost, $25 for certificate of origin for CCQ member and $45 for non-member. With the eCerts, $28 for CCQ member and $48 for non-members. For other documentation prices, just contact our office. Useful tips and common mistakes to avoid. One of the most common mistakes is that some of our clients think that port of loading and port of discharge is the same thing, which is clearly not the case. Brisbane can be only the port of loading. The port of discharge is always the overseas port. Please refer to your airway bill or the bill of lading when completing your certificates. Another common mistake is the wrong origin criterion on the FTA certificates or the origin criterion Australia. There is no origin criteria Australia under any FTA. For example, with TAFTA, the origin criterion can be wholly obtained or product specific. Both refer to originating goods in Australia. On the screen, you can see a real example from one of our clients, Taiwan origin criterion under Thailand-Australian FTA. A reminder, under TAFTA, the goods can be originated from Australia, Thailand, or a combination of both only. Taiwan doesn't even come into it. HS codes, please pay attention to the correct HS code and include in your certificate of origin the 6 digits only. If you're not sure, ask Seabridge or your freight company. You may find that on occasions your customer will insist that a particular template is required by customs. With FTA certificates, ACI, in collaboration with the Department of Foreign Affairs, has developed the relevant templates applicable for UNSTA, TAFTA, JEPA, CAFTA. Those templates are exchanged by the Department of Foreign Affairs with their counterparts in Japan, Korea, and ASEAN, so as our signature and stamp signatures are forwarded by Department of Foreign Affairs to the ASEAN Secretariat and are accessible by the relevant overseas customs authorities. When they give you such a request, all it means that your buyer came across to their customs version of the document. Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and ourselves will always support you by getting things right. Overseas buyers requesting change in wording in the certificate of free sale is a no-go. The only exception can be made if we formally advise through the official channels, which are the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Department of Foreign Affairs, that this is a new government regulation in a particular market. If an overseas officer rejects your FTA certificate on the basis that don't have the signature of our officer on file, contact us immediately, as there is no such a thing as signatures on file. All signatures are regularly uploaded on a special website set up by the ASEAN Secretariat for Customs officials only. To avoid rejections overseas, invest in a good color printer to print your eCerts. We came across two cases where if the documents are printed with a poor quality printer, are rejected overseas as perceived as forgery. Always print certificate of origin in color and double-sided. When it comes to ATA carnet, under no circumstances let this document to expire and your goods are still overseas. Contact us immediately, otherwise you'll be paying custom duties. And my final note for the day is, please call us when you need assistance with your export documents. We're here to help. Thank you.
Thanks, Diana, and thank you. I trust that has been informative for you. Of course, we could talk for hours on all of these points, but if there's anything further that you need, in-depth information in any sort, please contact Tim, Diana, or myself for further information. So now we're going to have a few questions. If you haven't already, please type your questions into the system, and we'll read those out and try to answer those for you right now. But to get us started, I've got a question for you, Diana. We've got one here, a simple one. When I export to Thailand, which certificate of origin should I use?
The first thing we have to know whether you're exporting product originating from Australia. If the product originates from Australia or from Thailand, or is a mixed origin of both, then we have three choices: TAFTA, UNSTR, or non-preferential certificate of origin. Check whether there are any tariffs concessions for your products under UNSTR and TAFTA. If yes, choose the one with the most favorable duty rates. If there are no tariff concessions, you can use a non-preferential certificate of origin. If the product came from China, for example, and you're re-exporting it to Thailand, then certified declaration of origin will be applicable.
Great, thank you very much. We have another question. A client wants, this one's for you, Tim. A client wants us to arrange a shipment door-to-door. What Incoterm do you recommend that we apply?
Okay, well, basically with door-to-door shipments, there's two Incoterms to be aware of. First one being DAP and the second one being DDP. Now, be very aware that if you do DDP, you will be up for import customs clearance and import taxes. So that is an area where a lot of people get caught in regards to taxes coming back to them in regards to their shipment. So we highly recommend that DAP is what people use in regards to Incoterms for door-to-door shipments, and that the buyer then becomes responsible for the import customs clearance and import taxes applicable under that Incoterm.
Thank you, Tim. Another one for you, Diana. Question is, I will be exporting originating Australian products to Malaysia. What happens if a letter of credit is involved and requires a certificate of origin issued by the Chamber of Commerce?
Well, that's a very good question. Malaysia has two FTAs with Australia. One is UNSTR and the other one is MAFTA. For exports of originating goods from Australia under MAFTA, which is Australia-Malaysia bilateral free trade agreement, self-issued declarations of origin applies per certificate of origin. Considering that the letter of credit requires certificate of origin from the Chamber of Commerce, then MAFTA will be ruled out from the choice. The next step is to check whether your products qualify for reduced tariffs under UNSTR. If so, this is your answer. You have to apply for UNSTR certificate of origin with us. If the base tariff without the FTA is 0, you can use a non-preferential certificate of origin. And if you need any additional information, please give us a call. We can discuss after the webinar.
Thanks, Diana. I actually have another one for you again. What happens if my FTA certificate of origin is rejected overseas?
Contact us ASAP. That's my best advice. We will require from you the following information: the port of rejection, the name of the customs officer rejecting the certificate, the official reason for the rejection, and a copy of the certificate. Then, through Australian Chamber of Commerce and Department of Foreign Affairs, we will intervene on your behalf. As they are very powerful organizations involved in the matter, usually it is resolved very quickly and satisfactorily.
Okay, we've only got time for one or two more. If you've got any questions, please send them through now. I've got one for you, Tim. Can I apply for an export certificate under Xdocs after export already?
The short answer is no. Once your shipment has been exported and you require a certificate for produce, you basically cannot get an export certificate from Xdoc. Australian Quarantine only authorise export documents prior to export of the shipment. So once the actual vessel sails, you may be able to get the goods down to the wharf, but once that vessel sails and if your Xdoc certificate is not authorised at time of export, it will not be issued afterwards. There is a long-winded process, and it becomes very technical in regards to what is required to get that export doc certificate authorised after export, and it can result in the shipment having to be returned.
Great, thanks Tim. We're going to have to stop the questions there, but of course if you've got anything further, please do not hesitate to contact Timothy at Seabridge or Diana at Australian Business Customers and Solutions if you've got anything further. I would like to just thank CCIQ, Timothy and Diana, and also you, the listener, for joining us today. I trust the webinar has been helpful for you, and we look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you very much.